Meeting recording has started.
Sorry. Okay. So Hassan, can you just give me a quick thumbs up? You can hear me okay? Good, perfect. So, well, thank you again to the Staff Council for this opportunity for me to moderate the second session. I hope that I'm going to be passing on the baton to somebody else in the next one, but really this one I feel quite honored to do, and we have today with us Theresa. I mean, the topic is, it talks about blockchain, but as I'm sure as this session goes along, Theresa will explain that it goes way beyond just blockchain as a technology, the topics that she's hopefully going to discuss and present to us in this next hour. But before I go into introducing Theresa, and I'd just like to mention a few simple house rules. Please keep yourself muted. Please use the chat for questions. We will moderate and have a look, etc. I'm sure as the session goes along, there'll be an opportunity for us to open the floor to actually have a more informal discussion. But last but not least, one of the tools that we have, if you can open this either in your browser or on your phones, is a tool called Menti. If you go now into the chat, Steve will put it in there. So if you can go to Menti, and there is a code that you can use 6406-4429. And here we will be doing interactive polls. So to keep this session interactive, so we can also gauge the feedback and to see how much we also understand about this topic. If you can open up in your browser a second window and go directly to Menti, enter the code, or if you're on your phone, your smartphone, etc., do the same thing there. And it makes the session a lot more fun than just listening to myself and Theresa for the next hour. So with that, I'd just like to go into a brief introduction, Theresa, of you, and then we will have a very quick icebreaker, and then you can also then describe a little bit more about yourself. So I was very lucky to meet Theresa about 2 years ago, I think now. I hope I don't get this wrong, but very much at the beginning of your journey, and your journey 2 years ago is nothing like where you are quite now. I know things have accelerated at a tremendous pace for you. Theresa is the founder and chief executive officer of markta. She's going to describe more about it. This is an Austrian-based, what was a startup, and it is based around online food delivery platform, which brings food, grocery products, etc., using technology, particularly around blockchain, to bring a tremendous amount of transparency and efficiency around how you buy, deliver, etc., those goods. She's going to describe it in a lot more detail and better than I can. I know through this that she's been recognized. She's just recently, and congratulations, by Forbes as one of the most successful 30 under 30 females. I know you also received an SDG award. Was it not last year or the year before? So we're really, really honored, Theresa, to have you join us in this session. And I think it's going to be an excellent opportunity for us to learn about your experience, what you've gone through in terms of adopting technology, also in terms of the pandemic, how you see this as an opportunity. And probably along the way, we can discuss about how we as an international organization can learn from some of this and hopefully adopt some of that in our own projects and programs. So just before I open up to you, Theresa, just to break the ice, if all of you could just quickly go to Menti and put in your code, and we just want to see where people are joining us from. So you should have, when you go to Menti, you should see an interactive map, and I'm doing it as we speak. And just click where you are, roundabout. So if you can try and click so that we just get a flavor as to where people are joining us from this afternoon, or this morning, or this evening, depending on where you are. So I'll just give Just a few more seconds. Hopefully, a few more people are being able to use the poll, because it's very interesting. As we go along, we'll have 4 or 5 of these polls in order for you to contribute to the session. Okay, so while those are coming in, it seems like, well, good. We have people, wow, US, we have Latin America, South Africa, China, Asia, etc. So quite a global presence. So thank you very much, colleagues, for joining us. So Theresa, I pause there and I give you an opportunity to, before we go into the Q&A, to you to introduce yourself. So go ahead.
Sounds good. Do you hear me fine as well?
Absolutely, perfectly clear.
Perfect. That's how we are heading forward. All right. So yes, Jason, I think it was 2 years ago, and we met at a very interesting project where we piloted some ideas of blockchain with markta. I will actually give you also some input why it's difficult to implement it with Austrian farmers, but I think overall it's a very interesting strategy also that will definitely have very promising future projects in the future, especially in terms of transparency and security. And those factors are, I think, even in markets like Austria, which is highly sophisticated in terms of food production, still lacking behind. So thanks for that intro. I'm very much interested in that. To myself, I grew up in the countryside in Austria. I now live for 11 years in Vienna, and I founded markta. To be honest, the idea phase was 4 years ago, with the idea as a virtual farmers market. So always having in mind, how do we have new concepts from farm to fork? And basically, how do we also use markta as a tool to actually help farmers directly sell their products, and for that also be more independent compared to the big market structures that we often have in our agro-food systems. Because I myself also studied before socio-ecological economy and policies, and one of my favorite topics was exactly the system analysis of understanding the different factors that can actually help us shape our future economic systems towards much more sustainable and more SDG orientated topics. So I don't know, when we won the Austrian SDG award, and it was last year in winter, it was really interesting because we kind of ticked almost all the boxes that the jury wanted to see. And nevertheless, I think it's interesting understanding that markta tries to have, on the one hand, this awareness aspect and giving people more information in terms of where is food being produced, so who's actually behind that. It's a lot about transparency, but it's also about creating value for food production, which is not there anymore. Very often, it is very often about finding the cheapest price on where to produce, as our globalized economy is optimizing in that matter usually still, but it doesn't really recognize production that much. And I started a food blog before doing markta, and that was basically my approach how to get there. It's a lot about storytelling. It's about not only just providing information, but also getting people engaged and creating passion. Because I do believe and this is really for me one of the most honorable appointments today, to be honest, because I've always been looking toward the UN, as I see that there's so much potential really in this awareness building and the common sense and basically transition that we can all together push towards more sustainable systems. And I think this is the perfect setup for having open discussions about that. And this is a little bit an intro to myself and markta itself, but I'm actually waiting for more questions. Otherwise, I won't stop talking for an hour, and that's
no. No, thank you, Theresa, for the introduction, and then some of the points that you've already touched on as a part of the questions. But I think we can use an opportunity to delve a little bit deeper. So, I mean, you just mentioned a bit about what markta is about and about the idea that you had, and I mean, so if I was to ask you, what is special? I mean, we as consumers, I'm looking at now myself as a consumer, and I go out onto the street, I see my Spars, I see my Billers, my Mircos, they also have their online platforms, etc. But what really differentiates you in that sense? And also an interesting question I'd like to ask is that, given that technology is a large part as well, quite a strong component of your business model, and we often talk about frontier technologies as disruptors. Yes. And if I was to ask you that, not only what is special, but how are you disrupting? How are you disrupting the market, if you like, that you're now competing with. So go ahead.
Well, basically, we do have a much more platform aspect than really trying to be the middleman. And we're trying to cut off the middleman in that sense. And I think this is really what differentiates us from the classical, supermarket structures that we're used to. Basically, the biggest challenge we have in our current agro-food system is that the farmers are the ones to be paid the least in the entire value chain. Usually, there's only between 10 to 15% of the price of the products we buy in the supermarkets goes back to the original producer and the farmer, and the rest of it is actually distributed along the value chain. And with markta, we guarantee the farmers 70% of the income, and with the rest of the 30%, we organize it in a very just-in-time and lean matter without, having supermarket stores as well with a lot of personnel and so on. And I think this is the disruptive part actually of the technology aspect, because we're trying to create a platform base where there's open access towards the farmers. So basically anyone who wants to supply the system can. Of course, there has to be quality standards, and we're looking at that also in a very detailed level, because that's what we actually want to guarantee you as a consumer. We don't want to sell the, big scale industrialized meat product, which is, you can buy in every gas station in Austria, alongside to organic, regional, small scale family farms, where you really know that if there were animals, held and even, slaughtered in that sense, that it's done in a very fair matter. And I think here we also differentiate ourselves of not just having a big assortment and the consumer is the one who actually, once again, is the one to choose. I actually sometimes want to question that the consumer is the one who always has the choice, because you can't have choice if you don't have perfect information. That's basically my free market critique sometimes. And I do believe that if we do use markta as a pre-selection, and we guarantee our customers and the ones that actually trust in us, that we only use family farms that produce mainly organically. Sometimes we do have some that are too small to have organic certificates. Then we really go there and also check for quality standards. So I think we really try to create a barrier in terms of sustainability and fairness standards, but on the other hand, try to have more access so that it's not, everything being pushed through 3 supermarket chains in Austria. In our example, it's quite intense. There's 3 chains making up until almost 90% of the entire market. So of course, along to them is about 160,000 family farms in Austria, and basically their only way of distribution are the 3 chains. Of course, there's a big, there's just not equal pay.
I think it's it. I mean, just a brief reflection from my side. It's interesting when I think back to my own childhood, is that we were very reliant, coming from the UK, on the corner shop or going to the local farmer, which has been overwhelmed in the last 20, 30 years by the more larger corporates, as you mentioned. It's similar situations back in the UK like it is here. But by using technology, you're actually being able to bypass all of that and take us back. It's almost back to the future, but through technology. It's very, very interesting. Look, let's just quickly move on. I'm encouraging colleagues as we go along to ask questions. So I've got one. I
appreciate that. I actually am reading that along. That's why I'm looking in both directions at the moment.
Okay, so I read it. I will quickly read it to colleagues, and you can respond to it. So thanks, Adot. What does the technology cost for the farmer? What additional connectivity requirements are? What is needed to benefit from the platform? It sounds like the answer to African farmers of cash crops, coffee, tea, etc. Good question, Adot. You've actually taken away about 2 or 3 of my questions that I was going to ask. So go ahead.
I think it's fine if you don't mind to quickly already jump into it, because I think it's interesting to have more open discussions. Otherwise, really, there's so much to talk about. It's good to moderate in that sense.
Please. Yeah, go ahead.
So it doesn't cost anything initially. That was also one of my critiques along many classical structures, that there's listing costs and stuff like that. Basically, we work on a provision-based fee. We do have 2 models with markta. The first model is really the classical marketplace approach, where there's a provision of all in all 17% for markta, where the farmer basically lists the product himself or herself. So basically really typing in product details, uploading photos, and it's an open market space. That's actually what I started with in 2018 when we met Jason. Nevertheless, we also figured out, and this was my bigger learning and much more tougher, actually a tougher challenge for the farmers. That was already really awesome, and not just enough, but they were actually, we were being, flooded even with registrations. Because all of a sudden they had a free access to a web shop where there was no risk on their side, but just as soon as they sold something, markta also got a provision. Nevertheless, and that was the bigger challenge that we, I think, with all sustainability projects actually trying to reshape systems the consumer wasn't ready. So the consumer was expecting to get everything within one box, one basket, everything that probably Amazon also shaped in terms of free delivery costs, basically next day whatsoever. And that was not possible with the marketplace, because one farmer reacted, 2 days later, the one actually took it quite serious and sent out the products the same day. But it was not easy for us to have on that level an open system, but still meet the requirements of the consumer. That's why with the end of 2019, we also built up a logistics center, actually the first fresh fulfillment center in Vienna for family farms and not just, supermarket structures. That's what it did in 2019. And that was actually our breakthrough, because we were ready for the Corona crisis. And just to give you some numbers, I know, Jason, you'll also ask that about later, but it's just a matter of flow. We had about 120 to 130 parcels per week before the lockdown. And all of a sudden, 1 week after another, it was 2,500 deliveries we did per week. Wow. With shopping baskets over 100 euros. Wow. So it was really a massive breakthrough that we did there. And I think here in that model, we see that we really match the consumer's preferences. But of course, it's much more difficult because there's an entire fulfillment, logistic, and so on structure. Nevertheless, at the moment, also here, we charge the 30%. As I was saying, the 70% goes to the farmers. Maybe we raise it maximum up to, I would say, 35, but not more than that. Otherwise, I would, again, have the principles and also understand how to, guarantee the farmers a living. That's basically the most important thing. And there's no fixed fees.
Thank you. Thanks, Theresa. We're going to park the bit about how could this be applicable to a developing country, take Africa, for example. We'll come back to that after the first poll. But there's a very quick follow-up from a dot, which I think is relevant right now anyway, which is, I'm a farmer. How do I do this? Do I have to go on? I need an app? Do I need my smartphone device? Do I need to go onto some website? How am I expected to do this from the provider? Yeah.
Once again, the first part, the marketplace, a farmer needs either a phone or an app. It's basically a web-based service, and the entire portal you can manage yourself. There's everything, any access that you have is actually good to use it. For the second project, what we now did with the fulfillment in Vienna, and I actually think that's on the long run the smarter way to also comply with consumer behaviors. At the moment, we're doing a lot actually just on a regular basis with emails and telephones with producers. Not because of us, but the different producers on a regular daily basis, there's so much involved on a daily basis with their production and already considering quality and everything. Sometimes I think a lot of people underestimate the availability of time in terms of getting farmers to use new tools. So I think we have to build it, or at least that's our strategy, to build up a process. At the moment, we're always, reachable, and farmers actually really prefer to pick up the phone still and just simply give us, anyhow, the orders, everything is automated. They're getting emails, everything is done with a cutoff and midnight. But basically, we have to keep the technology here on a very low level with the intention to build up the same portal structure where the farmer also does a lot more him or herself on a very flexible basis, I would say within the next 6 months. So here we really see it's okay to have MVPs in that sense, so a minimal viable product. That's actually working quite well here.
Yeah, I think there's a big misconception. It might come out from this that blockchain brings with it a lot of complexity, etc. But actually, the actual interface normally to capture the data is normally very straightforward and easy to use. Look, there are many questions coming in. I'm going to pause just for a second because to give colleagues an opportunity. So we've heard a bit about this. So let's go, Steve. Can we go to the first poll? And let's find out how familiar people are in terms of, well, specifically blockchain in this sense, yeah? So you go to Menti, and you will see that there are 4 questions that you can scale from 1 to 5 about what you know, what you don't know, from the left to the right. So not knowing much on the left, not knowing a lot on the right, 1 to 5. Blockchain, crypto, hash rates, private keys. Those who don't know anything about hash rates, this is a way of measuring the units of the processing power of a blockchain network. And a private key is what grants a cryptocurrency user the ownership of that ledger, etc. So quite technical. I'll be very honest in mine. I know a reasonable amount about blockchain, a little bit about crypto, a bit about hashtags, nothing at all about private keys. So those are my honest and open responses to that. So don't worry, Theresa. Today we're not going to start grilling you about hash rates and private keys.
Thank God. No, and I actually want to share the learning, of course, on the blockchain part.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to it because I think we also see the potential, but in reality, how to get people there, it's still there's still some time needed, I guess.
Yeah. No, we have a few questions that we'll come on to on that. There's a few coming into the chat about blockchain, etc. So, okay, colleagues, thanks a lot. So I guess we on the first 2, I expect that we would have some idea and are familiar with blockchain. So somewhere down the middle of the road, and the bottom 2, hash rates and private keys, perhaps less so. More people know about the private keys than certainly I was expecting, which is good. Okay, thanks a lot. So before I go back to the chat, if I may, I just want to bring us back into the questions here because, and I back to something that Adot had flagged, and we also have, I have here on my notes, is that, so you've seen this and you've seen how well this can work, such a kind of platform within Austria, which has, of course, a very good infrastructure, etc. I'm talking mainly in the technical area and what have you, and people are quite very savvy here. Can you ever imagine what it would be like to take this into an emerging market, for example, say Africa, and what are the kind of challenges that you would see? And then to counter that, obviously, how could that be solved? And I'm going beyond the infrastructure of, having connectivity.
No, I understand what you mean. No, in my dreams, to be honest, there has always been all this thinking. We just need to have, clear software solutions as well as some processes. Otherwise, you can apply that basically anywhere. There's always farmers outside needing different forms of distribution. We want to have a more locally embedded structure, or at least that's what I want as future climate may change and make it much more difficult for agriculture in general to have overall crops that grow anywhere, because there will be much more difficulties in weather conditions in terms of soil and stuff like that. So yes, I believe there should always be a direct connection between producer and consumer, especially because that's where we can regain responsibility in the sense. As soon as consumers realize wherever we are, and really also even thinking about Africa, there's a lot there that we actually can eat and where we can actually help local people as well survive in that sense. To me, to be honest, that makes sense anywhere. Thinking about Africa, I think you would have to have even easier structures in terms of local distributions, and maybe I will forward one of the thoughts I'm having. In Vienna, we of course have a very sophisticated infrastructure, as well as, with cooling, with different things, with last mile. I mean, we're doing here 3 different steps. We're delivering in Vienna even on the same day. So everything, the value chain is done within, I would say, even 12 hours. So the farmer harvests it in the night until 6 in the morning. Then we get every fresh fresh product really on the same day, delivered between 6 and 8 in the morning. Then there's the pick and pack process. And then me as a consumer already has the availability from the product from 2 o'clock in the afternoon on. So it's a very tight process. And of course, this is also matched to very high consumption requests from urban consumers in Vienna. I think that also matches with that. Nevertheless, what I think is important is to have local pickup stations, because basically we focused on Vienna as well, as there is about 2 million people living there. And of course, it's easier to start in a city than really on the countryside. I would be thinking even in Austria, it's much more sensible to organize everything around a pickup point as well, because that's basically one of the things. The last mile is always the priciest one, especially the last mile to the doorstep. And in Austria and Vienna, we had before Corona about 18 pickup stations within the city of Vienna, usually situated along, I would say, businesses as well as actually institutions. And there's some even directly in living spaces. So within, urban development of new areas, many people have next to their bike room their markta pickup station. And of course, that's really the most convenient thing. And you can ecologically reduce the last mile, because you're delivering probably 50 packages per day to one pickup point, apart from actually doing 50 deliveries within one area. And this solution with the pickup point, we will continue that again in Vienna with a big push after the lockdown phases, because of course at the moment really home doorstep delivery is the preferred channel that the consumer chooses. But the pickup stations are much more interesting in terms of sustainability and in general, I would say urban demand, how you really meet that well. Going back to the pickup stations, this is how I would do it in countries like Africa, where there's no last mile delivery, but pickup stations organized very leanly, and only the pickup stations are being delivered, and you can actually, again, shorten supply chains there.
No, we have it. I'm just looking again back now to the chat as opposed to what I was wanting to. To colleagues, TP, Alexander and Julius, your questions I'm going to come back to in about 5-10 minutes or so when we start talking about impact funding and startups, etc. Sure. We have a whole section on that. But just staying on this now, I mean, from Juan Pablo, you just addressed then a little bit about the last mile. Colleagues are asking about great system to apply in Africa, but of course we need to consider this in terms of the country context. That's it, I guess that, yeah. Last mile problem of blockchain is more referred to the bridge between its physical asset and its digital representation on the chain.
Got it.
You get that? Good, I don't understand that, so.
I actually have an idea of what he's talking about, to be honest. Basically, and this was exactly the challenge. Let me just summarize our blockchain experience very quickly. We did 2 pilot projects on the blockchain aspect, and we were not able to fund it ourselves. The farmer was not willing to pay anything whatsoever in terms of transparency, and the consumer was also not. So as soon as we would have a tool where we had a better way on understanding the monetary aspect of the blockchain, because basically all the partners that we tried to work with that already had existing systems in that way, always were charging much too high prices compared to the prices we actually charge for doing the entire logistics system in that sense. So we actually had the challenge to find producers that were willing to even work with us on the blockchain project, because they didn't see the value added in that sense. And that's why basically it's still on hold. As soon as there's certain things and markta can basically finance the entire blockchain project, it will happen, because I think it's the most promising way. And I would definitely do it with some kind of ERN codes, as well as maybe there's also some ideas of RFID. So really getting also some kind of chip and tracking in the product, because especially talking about apples, you can't really put something on an apple. You can put something on the box, of course, but as soon as you go down to one product, which is, very pure in that sense, it becomes difficult.
Absolutely.
And I thought it was very, very sad, but it seems like within the Austrian pharma scene, the willingness was going to zero, basically. And some projects you want to push more, and some you have to put on hold because maybe they're too early into timing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, colleagues, just a brief pause again, if we may, just to go back to our polling before we carry on with some of the questions. So Steve, if you can just pull up the next question for us. How would you rank the 3 pillars of blockchain technology? So you have a few options here. So if you can open that up, you will see basically it's around decentralization, transparency, and immutability. So just a few clicks, if you can just select your 1, 2, 3 and then submit that in the Menti polling tool. And there we see coming in. So the 3 pillars of blockchain technology, the one clearly at the moment is transparency, decentralization, and immutability. I guess, Theresa, that's no surprise to you, having...
No, I actually went for the exact same ranking, because I think the transparency is really there. You have the most value added in the sense, because basically decentralization, to be honest, it can also be done with regular digital tools. It doesn't really require always blockchain in that sense. In my perspective, looking on the food sector, because basically just having tools that can, link farmers to consumers directly can be used in different ways. But transparency issue is existing really all over Austria, because even going either not only to the supermarkets, you sometimes really can't follow back to the original farm, and very often, to be honest, but even more within food being used in restaurants. That's where it's really getting weird and very actually traumatic. There's, I think, probably everybody has heard about the Wiener Schnitzel, which is one of the most famous dishes being produced by veal. And there's only 10% of this in the gastronomy area coming from Austria, and 90% coming from abroad.
Wow.
Basically, just because of a price difference of about 25 cents per Wiener Schnitzel. And people still are looking so much towards cheap prices, and the gastronomy has no declaration of where the food comes from. And here blockchain could have really revolutionized this aspect, because it's not just about putting on made in Austria, especially with food. It's really a big challenge. As soon as you pack something in Austria, even in apples, for example, you put them in a tray, you can really claim that they are being produced in Austria. The same, from the supermarkets, they have bread which is being baked directly in the supermarket. And the funny is that most of the dough is being produced in Poland and other EU countries. But just because of baking it within the supermarket, you can put made in Austria on it. So this is really something where I see there is a lot to be done.
Wow, yeah, no, that the one about the Wiener Schnitzel at me. I mean, I'm not naive enough.
I know that's really weird, and probably you have eaten a Wiener Schnitzel.
The schnitzel I had was from Vienna, but I certainly was hoping most of it was coming from.
No, it's really weird. We don't have enough veal. It's just not working out that way. It's 10% max.
I mean, so you just back to some of the questions there, then, Theresa. So, I mean, you've touched on this, but if you could summarize, I guess now as well, try to take this onto a broader context of not just your experience with markta, but back again to how this could be used in emerging markets. One or two just very clear key advantages for those local farmers and producers that you feel this brings to them, yeah?
Of course, I mean, probably what they could do is not only be subsistence farmers, but actually try to make a living out of certain things. And I would actually want to make it much more attractive and actually not profitable, because that always sounds funny with food, but really being able to live from farming should be something that I really want to foster all around where we're ever working in the future. And I think it's on two aspects. On the one, it's about really getting most of it what the consumer is paying for it, because basically that's the unfair part. The farmers are the least ones to negotiate in that sense, and that's a big dependency that is happening. And the other aspect, of course, raising awareness and value in general for local products, because the more local, and you saw that because of COVID quite intensively, there's really a lot of countries that couldn't, import export that much anymore, and especially with food, that's really where we should rethink globalized systems. So I think it's an easy way of getting access towards a market that you were before dependent on intermediaries.
Good, thank you. So sorry, someone just mute your mics, please. I'm getting an echo.
Ooh.
So thank you, thanks a lot. So let me just go through a few of the questions that we have here before we then jump into SDG aligned efforts, not only from markta but in other areas. So let me just go back here, have a look. Okay, I will the technology guide farmers in SMEs, last mile, system, country context. Okay, Juan Pablo, we have some detailed questions on blockchain. Maybe we can come back to that later on data points and what have you. Leuchin, well, I think what Theresa explained is that although there is a project going on with markta to bring everything on blockchain, given what's just happened in the last 12 months with the pandemic, etc., that was put to one side and focused much more on having a platform that engaged the farmers, etc., to the end consumer. So, and I don't, we need to be careful in terms of when we refer to Africa. Of course, it's a large continent with a large number of countries, and there is a certain amount of infrastructure there. I guess I'm hoping, and I'm looking at what's in front of me now. People like Alexandro from Brazil, I see Tidiane from Senegal, and Aurelia from Ethiopia, that hopefully they can bring towards the end of this.
There's really a lot of valid points as well.
No, absolutely. And also we're having that from Nigeria. So it would be really good at some point that I'm hoping towards the end that we just open this up, not me reading, and those colleagues, particularly from our field offices, can ask you directly some of those questions, knowing what they see locally and how they see something like this could be adopted. But before then we jump into the SDGs, just another very quick poll, if you don't mind, colleagues. We just want to ask you a little bit about, do we think blockchain, and I know, Juan Pablo, you've already made reference to it, do we think that there is a clear application within UNIDO's projects and ideas? And if not, maybe just blockchain, but just looking at this type of technology, these types of platforms that are about connecting, if you like, especially as Theresa mentioned at the beginning, along the value chain, something that, of course, we work extensively within UNIDO. So it's just a simple yes or no. And the answers are coming in. Colleagues, thank you. One person says no. Most people are saying yes. 2, no. And it will be interesting if those of you who feel not, just drop in the chat why you feel not, that this is not a technology that we could apply into UNIDO in terms of our projects and ideas. I personally am currently piloting this within finance for donor reporting, working with the German government, BMZ. So just to see if it could work. I've still not made my mind up whether it can or not yet. Maybe it's something we drop, but let's see. So thanks a lot, colleagues. So most people feel that this is a technology that we could adopt and we could try to embed in some of our projects and ideas. So moving on towards the next part. So heard a lot, Theresa, about markets and some of the challenges and etc. that may be applying this to some of our emerging markets that I think we can also come back to. But let's home in SDGs. So first question, I guess, for me with markta is that you won an award or an SDGs. What was you aiming for? There are 17 goals. I know you know them. It's great that we have people from private business who really understand the SDGs. I think that's quite unique. A little bit about how you know about them would also be useful. So how do you know about the SDGs? Which one do you think you're aiming for? And well, why did you receive an award for this?
Well, basically, I myself started the first thing that I was actually familiar with was the Millennium Development Goals, because I started getting to know the UN when I was in high school, and I actually participated every year in various Model United Nations conferences, even hosting one myself in Graz. So I'm really one of the all in love things. It has been my other career path apart from not, doing in social entrepreneurship myself now. And after that, of course, I have always had these touch points. And for example, there's in Austria as well, the RAUN, it's called the Regional Academy on the United Nations. So this was another thing I did parallel to my studies when being in one of the Austrian business universities. There was also this project where we were directly using the topic of gender equality and farming, specifically actually in Austria, using case studies compared to more Eastern Europe, because basically there's a lot of farm work being done by women, and basically usually in Austria farming is always like a part-time job, and the main position actually goes to the male part of the family actually being employed somewhere, and the woman is very often leading the farm but not officially being employed, as well as pension security. There's a lot of things happening there. So this was one of the first introductions actually where I was already working with the goals and markta together. And then, of course, just by simply, going through the different goals, it was clear that there's touch point on every aspect. And maybe that's because, I initially started markta with the general intention that I think that we have to have different consumption patterns, because yes, the consumers themselves are the ones I don't think they always have the full information, but if they don't change and if they don't make demands, the governments and the politics will also not change in that sense. So I thought the first thing was really to start with sustainable food consumption specifically, because it was so relatable to everybody. You really have to, you eat every day. It's not just about fair fashion, which is also a very important aspect, but from a consumption aspect, the food is the most direct way. And just thinking that we ourselves eat about, I think it's 65 tons per lifetime in terms of, amount of food. And I do believe it really well matters if it's like from an organic and sustainable and fair source, or if it's really, junk food and it's so much related to health towards, I don't know, it all encompasses that. And that's of course why, I don't know, just looking at the SDGs, I think the one that I always had in mind, of course, was the consumption part, but as well as, starting with the second SDG goal, it aims to achieve food security and improve nutrition in general, or promote more sustainable agriculture. But then again, going also maybe, picking out certain ones, going back to the number 8 SDG, where we want to build more resilient infrastructures. And that's again, going back to this, how can we supply urban, also the future of our cities, and actually bridge rural supply with urban demand. Yeah, I could, list them all, but basically I think as well as, and then, the SDG 12 is of course the most direct one, but everything else is linked to it again.
Jason, you are muted.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking if I should continue elaborating on that, because SDG 15 would also be great, talking about, the ecosystems and the biodiversity.
So, colleagues, we have we're going to keep this session open, and it's meant to be interactive, and a few of you I know would like to take the floor. So let's open up then. I mean, sure. Let's open up to some questions. So colleagues, Juan Pablo, I don't know if you want to unmute and ask a few questions. Adot, prepare yourself. Alexandro, Tijan, Aurelia, etc. Those of you in the field, we open it up, yeah?
Sure.
Who's going to jump in first?
Now it's not only questions, but music.
Yeah. Okay, while of you logistically are trying to get yourself organized to ask some questions, Steve, just throw up the next poll. And the next poll is, why do you think UNIDO could find its competitive advantage in promoting blockchain technology? Yeah. And in the meantime, colleagues, please feel free to come in with questions.
Jason, if I may.
Yeah. Go in. Go ahead.
Thanks. First, to congratulate the Staff Council on this initiative. I think is really timely. As you know, we're all talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution and the technologies that are around this term, and we're doing a bit at our end, and I think it's really good. And also to have the presenters to share the experience in Austria, and of course, UNIDO, we work with developing countries. That's our key customer, but it's always really good to understand how the technology has been adopted or is being adopted in more developed countries. One key element that I would like to know more is, while we're getting to know the technology, we see that yes, transparency is one of the attributes or one of the things that blockchain can bring, but this is not the only one. And the experience that we have gathered so far is that if we want to develop blockchain into a traceability system or transparency system, is may not be worth, meaning that it is just like using your phone just to make phone calls, and your smartphone, you use it for many things except for doing phone calls. So on that is the questions that I posed were more on the smart contracts, where you are exploiting already the technology as to do smart contracts and tokens. You know, one of the key things, I mean, Bitcoin is known to be a Bitcoin and self-sustained system, and no need for verification. And I think that that's one of the attributes of blockchain, that you can skip that verification part. So just to be, what is your experience in using, or whether you have in mind using tokens and smart contracts? Just to finalize, one of the things that we see in developing countries as to we analyze the value chain and what are the problems that can be addressed by blockchain. And it's not only transparency, it's not only traceability, but it's also some of the things that were mentioned, as from one side is the transparency, where the product is coming from, but then the other, on that same highway infrastructure, is the payments. So whether the producers are really getting the payment, not only the amount of payment, but the timely payment. We see that there are a lot of producers that they send their products and they're paid 3 months later.
A challenge. Yes.
So in that sense is the question that I would like to pose. Thank you.
Very welcome, and thank you for proposing the questions. So on those ideas on smart contracts and tokens, we are not using it at the moment. I have the concepts ready basically, but maybe understanding a little bit more about markta itself. We have 14 employees up until now, and I'm very proud about them. But there's only, for example, three software developers, and really only being able to do one thing after another. So it has been really, our biggest issue has been financing. And it's very difficult to find this. And I think I even had mentioned it to Jason, that it would be an interesting topic for today. Because I think on the one hand, institutional wise, we already think about those future projects and have them in our head. But me, being in Austria and being very much linked to the Austrian financing of startups, which is still intensively old economy orientated, even the banks, how they analyze us, and they don't really value at all that we have this more, I would say, welfare economic perspective, where we really try to have fair connections for everyone. Nobody is willing to direct. Everybody finds it beautiful and great and awesome, and we're being awarded with every month there's an award, but basically the financing structure is definitely lacking. I am because I myself worked at a business consultancy before. We do apply regularly for fundings, but basically a funding is always helping you to really get up the setup. But as soon as you're going towards market, there's basically no funding. You always have to do it via the revenue. And this is, again, a little bit just the bottleneck that we have at the moment. And I just recently also exchanged with one, a German, actually, startup founder who's doing something very similar as markta. It's called Frische Post and it's from Germany. And they just recently, and she decided heavily if it was a good idea or not, but they decided to use a venture fund to actually, fund their business in the sense. And now, after I think 6 months, she's deciding to actually pay out the venture fund again and find a proper family office, because basically nobody can match within a sustainable business those venture fund perspectives of investment. So that's just maybe in a nutshell. No, we're not able to already build the stuff like that, because we still have to do a lot of things manually, because we don't have the resources in order to get there, even though that I see great potential also in the future. So maybe when we're talking 1 or 2 years, I'll speak freely about stuff like that, but at the moment we're very limited, to be honest.
Thanks, Juan Pablo and Theresa. I would say to Hassan, one of the future sessions should really be around impact investing and financing, because I think colleagues, and I also from my own limited experience of this, knowing that trying to leverage that in terms of being able to get finance that creates the impact and then the scale. Yeah, it's a whole topic and discussion in itself that I think we should come back to, Hassan, maybe at a later stage. But notwithstanding, Alexandro is joining us from Brazil. He's also was in Iran, also in China. Prior to that, here in Vienna, managing I don't know how many projects. So please go ahead. It'd be great to hear from you.
Thank you, Jason. No, my question is about cryptocurrency, because from my experience, there are many situations where people live in border area or in situation where the value of the local currency is not very stable. Do you think that cryptocurrency could facilitate this kind of business? And do you have something in mind, or do you think there are some perspective in the next few years? Thank you.
I mean, in general, and I can, talk about concepts that I have thought about. And yes, I do think it could be something very valuable, because it becomes I'm even thinking of having a cryptocurrency that actually promotes sustainable decisions of consumers. So understanding this token aspect, but as well as a payment aspect. Basically, my idea is the more you buy organic and the more from a more direct region with, really reduced transportation distances. That's why I think that we should actually have a benefit program where we really can guarantee the consumer, as soon as he or she makes decisions towards sustainable solutions, she actually gets a token back from that, not in a classical loyalty system, really promoting certain things. And this again, I think goes then into nudging and actually promoting certain decision makings in terms of behavioral economics. That is very interesting. In terms of really currencies, I understand what you mean and the challenges you have. Here I have really limited experience, because basically here, and that's again maybe relating back to the prior question on the payment structure of the farmers, since we're taking this responsibility as markta, also paying the farmers as earliest as possible, because we do know sometimes we even pay advance, because we understand the challenges that they have on their areas, even producing in advance and then being taking all the risks in terms of nature and what's going to happen. We're trying to really behave our best in that sense and be a best practice actually. But yes, all of those things should be integrated in the system within the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Alexandro. Colleagues from Vienna field, there's one good question here. Well, question point that was made here from our colleagues in Nigeria.
Yes.
We have a lot of neighborhood markets that may be difficult for this to work, as people can often just walk to the market and buy at a fair price. Yeah. Those doorstep deliveries are sometimes quite expensive.
Yeah, No, I definitely, and I was also very humble about the other consideration of that you can't, of course, compare every country in Africa within their rural and urban areas. I completely agree, of course, with that. Coming back to the market aspect, if the price is there fair and you would really, be able to guarantee that, I think it's still quite a low-hanging distribution form, which actually works well. What may be upon potential is, because, for example, the market aspect, really the farmers market in Austria, has reduced heavily, and I am not aware how this development has happened in Africa and different countries in that sense. Here, for example, in Vienna, we only have about 5 farmers markets that are still really from farmers' products and not just from traders using anyhow imported vegetables and meats and stuff like that. So it's again about transparency in that area. If there's like a high density of farmers markets, maybe the added value could only be that you really have a distribution within the markets, because what I experience in Austria, and we do have very high quality food production and also even a high awareness, I would say, even compared to Germany, for example. Nevertheless, one area focuses more on, I don't know, milk production, has cheese. Another area has more accessibility towards, I don't know, fish and certain other things. Then there's vegetable for another region. So we in Austria can definitely not survive within one region, but we do need certain standardized products that can be shifted. And here the platform, and also maybe in the future with more predictive analytics, that you can really understand what needs to be available within what area. And it's all again about a sourcing logic, basically, where we could have a benefit towards the local markets and not everybody traveling from one market to another.
Thanks, Theresa. Look, we're coming towards the last. We're going to go over a little bit. I'm sure Hassan won't mind. Let's have a look. There's a couple of more questions.
Sure.
And then we have one last poll to finish this, which will be about what do we think in terms of how this can support the SDGs. One question here, which is takes us away from technology platform, but is more about you, Theresa, from our colleague TP. What factors do you believe are important to have to enable and empower entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs like yourself? What do you think were those key factors, that help you?
What has helped me, and I always know it's challenging also to do it as a woman in Austria, there's below 10% of the Austrian startup founders are female, so we still have high inequality there. And I think it's still related mostly towards actually having some examples out there, because we don't. How I grew up, there was in the terms of the business world and the startups and the entrepreneurs, and in that sense it was always male dominated, and all of a sudden, and that's definitely my benefit, people are looking towards new perspectives on how to do that and actually find role models that can represent that. I used that role quite intensively because I feel quite responsible as well to have more women following me and not and really show them it's not that difficult. Also, men just jump into it, and you don't have to know it all. You just have to have the guts to have a good understanding and maybe even understand the benefits sometimes of the women who go much more towards the social innovation, to the impact factors and so on, because I do believe that sometimes from a female perspective, things are being thought more holistic, and male have the great, or please don't get me wrong, I'm a feminist all through, but nevertheless, of course, there's just factors that are attributed to one gender or another. And of course, from a startup perspective, everybody wants you to have utter focus and laser sharp focus, and maybe that's true that certain male founders have more ability in that sense. But it's also getting about the different structures out there, and what is needed is, on the one hand, visibility, and on the other hand, that is even worse, even globally. I think the number of venture capital funds that invests in female founders or teams where even one founder is female is, I think, around 7%. And that's, again, fostering a market of innovation startups that is, and I think the IT sector is here heavily influenced also by just the male perspective, in the sense, because there's so many coders, and especially looking at Silicon Valley, you really need more gender distribution here and more equality in that sense. And I can only push it. I don't know what is more needed than that, or
No,
there's more needed, but it's again about financing, to be honest, as well.
Yeah, but thank you. I mean, I know that you've been a huge advocate for that, not only in terms of course, your own business, but I see how you're promoting for startups, entrepreneurs, and females, certainly within Austria and beyond. So thanks for sharing that with us. We have colleagues on here as well who are doing a lot in this area. We have Eloise who's doing a lot around this about supporting startups in clean tech, etc. But there's so many things that we could talk about, and there's other colleagues, but I'm thinking we're coming towards the end.
Yep.
Now, there's one last question, but I'm going to tie it nicely to what Alexandra also asked, because it was an easy one of me, which he said, how can the private sector and the UN work more closely together? But let's go a bit deeper. Actually, if you're looking at an organization like UNIDO, Industrial Development, we do work, we have a department dedicated to agro-business, and we have another department dedicated towards how we can harness
technology. I'm already trying to get somehow connected more.
Well, through this, I hope there can be some follow-up connections, absolutely. So how would you see that we can embed this within our business models? And I'm going to throw in a controversial element to that, because in our last session we talked about intellectual property rights, So how can there be a UNIDO markta, for example? How could it be embedded in some of those value chains, coffee, whatever, leather, etc., that we're working in? Yeah. And while that is going, you're answering. Steve, bring up the last poll, please. So colleagues respond to how we feel this could contribute to the 17 SDGs while Theresa's responding. Thank you.
To be honest, I think the best thing that can work here is really to work out some pilot projects together that, of course, are in a certain perspective from the starter perspective funded, or it's basically just and we basically want to have a project to work together on. And I think as soon as you work on that on a the startup has to pre-invest and really, find out the perfect solution, and then maybe UNIDO will pick it up. It would be really great. And believe me, from a startup perspective, even for you, probably small projects can really help, not only to have, the direct, at least the cost neutral development of that product. I think that would be already helping a lot. But on the other hand, what is really helping is then again, as soon as a startup like markta has some reference projects like that, investment becomes easier. And I think that's what we're always forgetting. It's about getting the first step going. It was the same with the consumers. The most difficult thing was getting it to their doorstep. As soon as they tried the product, saw the quality, they were amazed and became, regular customers. And something like that, I think the UNIDO could be really more like an incubator as well in that sense, but just by doing small scale projects, and as soon as one thing goes well, UNIDO also really has a possibility, of course, to expand, but it's like a trial period where UNIDO helps, and it's not the startup, doing the development up front. And then sometimes that's really the most challenging thing. Most people don't understand the costs that already went into certain things, especially more from the private sector even. It's always like this final package. What's your price? Let's set it up. And for example, to have one case study, even just having a pickup station, for example, and promoting something like that, and of course giving accessibility to the UNIDO employees, that would be something direct where you could already have some benefit, for example, in our case. And nevertheless, as soon as I, of course, can say we have one of the pickup stations at UNIDO, it's not gonna hurt.
Yeah.
So that would be really awesome. And one more thing, because Nina, she's my CMO, and she just created a code for you to use. If you live in Austria or in Vienna, some of you do, as we saw in the prior map, we did a code which is called markta-UNIDO. I just posted it, and you can basically use it for trial out areas.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. Look, just to sum up, so colleagues, just before I wrap up with you, Theresa, and I was just looking at the poll. It's gone. Let me say, I can't memorize it, but I saw SDG 9 was the peak, which is good. Yeah, given that's ultimately our mandate around ISID, followed by SDG 12. SDG 8, etc. I think it's clear to say that blockchain could probably cross-cut most of the SDGs, but aligns itself nicely to our mandate under SDG 9. Theresa, it's been a great 1 hour to talk to you and our colleagues. I cannot believe there's so many points have been triggered. I mean, and colleagues particularly commend you. They congratulate you.
I saw it. Thank you so much. That's really nice.
I see two channels here, and I'm looking at not markta, I'm looking at you as well as an individual. Is that, of course, there may be opportunities for us here as a UN hub. Those are conversations that can go on with people like Hassan and etc. For support. But in our agro departments and in field locations, certainly we would share. If you don't mind, I have your email. We will share it with our colleagues.
Oh, I will also post it here as well because I'm, you know, if there's something happening, I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you.
I don't know. Let's just, you know, just thinking out loud. Thinking out loud here now. We have a lot of value change. We have a lot going on around agro. We're looking at how can we better harness new technology, innovation, platforms, blockchain, etc. We see successful businesses. If this can be somehow transposed to help our beneficiaries, then great. So Adot, just done. Yeah, I also share. Yeah, super. We'll ensure that we share this with our gender office as well. So with that,
thanks a lot. It was so lovely talking to you, and really. It's almost a dream come true, nevertheless. I love the UN and what you're doing, and please continue, because I do feel we need a counterpart towards classical private sector approaches of shaping our globe.
I think, Theresa, I think and I hope that we're going to, when we all get back to some kind of normality, with beyond these digital video conferencing, etc., we can meet you more in person. We have a number of events that I think would be very useful to hear again some of your inputs and see if we can work on any joint programs together. Hassan, from my side, thanks again for this opportunity. I loved it. It takes me back to those couple of years in communications. I will stop now. Theresa, thank you so much, and everybody for joining us from Vienna, and particularly those of you joining us from field locations. Okay, Aurelia, thank you finally for your comments from Ethiopia. We'll follow up on that. Hassan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you very much, Theresa. I am so happy that our unceremonial platform has had really very good momentum. And this is our second session. Our first session, we had like over 40 people. Today, we had like exactly 78 people who are attending. That means we have attained with the theme and with the presence, with this platform, 100% in the second session, increase of participants. The only thing that I can say, I'm so delighted, I'm so happy that our colleagues, your presence is our support. And of course, we are looking forward. Last time we talked about the private sector. Today we talked about the blockchain. And today in the blockchain, there was like, crypto coins. So most probably our next discussion will also go there. So we will have a full picture of everything that we need to know and how we can put it in our daily work. As Jason said, I will just concur to him that should any of you, particularly our colleagues from Agro, all of them, they're here, from the director to the, to the chiefs, they all are with us. So should you need anything, we are ready to help and support and pass on the information. I want to wish you a nice evening, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy, and thank you, our colleagues, particularly those in Asia, because it's too late there. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.